Right, well, hello and welcome again to Desert Island Drams on Whiskey and Cynicism. I'm Simon Smith. I'm maybe a slight departure from our usual viewing today. We obviously tend to view people in the whiskey world or rum or gin, but we're here with Dominic Tait, who is behind the rather fantastic Valentian vermouth, which is a kind of Scottish concept, but then with a kind of an Italian heart as well as for traditional vermouth. I'm going to let Dominic explain more about that. But firstly, Dom, welcome along, mate. How are you and what are you drinking?
Cheers, buddy. Thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. I am currently drinking a Boulevardier. So I whacked this together just before we came on the call with its Valentian Vermouth, Campari, and Lower East Side blended malt whiskey from the folks at the Borders Distillery. And the Valentian is actually a coffee infused Valentian. So I was playing around with some cocktails. So I've infused it with some coffee beans for about 3 days and then kind of filtered that out. So it's got a really nice kind of chocolatiness coming through to it, kind of with coffee notes as well. So it's really, really quite fruity, quite sweet.
Very nice. Well, I mean, I've been exceptionally lazy compared to that. I've just simply poured Valentian on ice, but it's delicious, I have to say. And I think first and foremost, I'd just ask you kind of what the process and the kind of thinking behind Valentian is, because there's quite a lot going on in the way it's produced, but also what I think is very interesting production behind it as well. So maybe you give the guys watching just maybe a kind of synopsis of what you do with the vermouth.
Yeah, so in essence, kind of the product itself, the vermouth itself, is a marriage of both Scotland and Italy. We've blended together the flavors of both countries, and we've kind of taken what key flavors from the two countries that we really loved the most. So the two kind of most important ingredients in the vermouth, or the starting point of the vermouth, are the small batch Italian wine and new make malt barley spirit. So spirit that would traditionally be aged to become Scotch whiskey. So, regarded as probably one of the best, if not the best, raw spirit in the world. We've taken that spirit and used it in the fortification and aromatization process of making the vermouth. And we wanted to really bring through those aromas to vermouth. We thought the base spirit was really important to kind of adding flavor, and that's why we thought new make malt barley spirit was a great way of giving a Scottish edge to the vermouth. We've also chosen botanicals that are really inspired by both Scottish and Italian flavors, cuisine, cooking, that we thought, really blended together. And these are botanicals, flavors, spices that are kind of widely cultivated in both countries as well as around the world. So the really kind of key critical ones for us are sage, rhubarb, bay leaf, things that you really associate with Scottish country cooking, and then we've also got strong notes of bitter orange and sweet orange, as well as a really unusual citrus that people don't really tend to use so much in spirit production or vermouth production anymore, which is bergamot. We're really big fans of Earl Grey tea, and that was kind of a note, that flavor that we thought it's quite unusual to come across this in vermouth, and that's the kind of citrus note from the Italian peninsula we really wanted to kind of imbue into our vermouth. We've also got some spice in there, ginger, cinnamon, and vanilla as well. So there's just little hints of them. They're not overwhelming, or they're kind of dominant flavors. It's all about kind of that balance, that kind of beautiful amalgamation of all the different ingredients together to create what we think is a really distinctive new take on vermouth. As far as we know, nobody's ever attempted to make a Scottish Italian sweet vermouth. There might be reasons for not having attempted to do it before, as it turned out it was really difficult to do. But we think it took us quite a long time of kind of trial and error, and over the course of a year we got to what we think is a really, really great product.
Just when you said bergamot, there was something is eluding me on the palate when I was drinking it that I couldn't quite spot. I think it might just be the bergamot. It's interesting as well that it could seem on first glance that throwing Scottish new make at an Italian vermouth is a bit gratuitous for the sake of it, but it works very well. The malty flavor is certainly pairable. I mean, it's a pairing that we know works. What you're drinking there, Rob Roy or Manhattan. We know that grain and vermouth go together. Did it kind of seem a bit of a no-brainer when you eventually landed on the concept?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. That was kind of part of where it came from. Myself and my brother were kind of we drank a lot of vermouth, we drank a lot of whiskey, we drank a lot of Manhattans and Rob Roys and Boulevardiers, and it kind of was like, there's something in this. There's these flavors really go well together. It was kind of, we're passionate about and have a great love of Scotland and heritage, and we spend a lot of time on holiday in Italy. It's where we holidayed growing up. And there was just something in those flavors that we thought actually paired really well together. And that's kind of, we thought, well, Scotland's not known for its wine production. So how can we put a slant on vermouth? Because we love vermouth. How can we put a Scottish slant on it? And it's exactly what you say. It was, we know they work well together, one in the aged format. What about during the production process? How can we add those elements to the final product?
It is a truly exceptional product, and I mean it literally is an exception. It's not like nothing I've drunk before in the vermouth world, but in a very, very good way. Do you think? I mean, it's interesting to me. If I take it from an Australian point of view, over the last 10 or 15 years, as the spirits industry's expanded there, we went from kind of having nothing to all of a sudden you can make an Australian Negroni, for example. Kind of building those spirits, those categories of Amari and things like that. Yeah. Seem natural, but in Australia, same with the wine trades, due to geographical isolation and also a hugely varied climate across it, making our own stuff there in maybe traditional ways kind of makes sense. In Europe, there's often a bit of a divide between countries. I'm not going into the political side of that in a minute, but wine is made by the French and the Italians and the Spanish. The Germans and the Czechs are good at beer. There's this kind of, those countries do well. And if I walked into a pub in England and said I just had an English sparkling wine, most people would say, well, no, we can't make champagne. The French do that, even though there's a huge English sparkling wine industry. Mm. Do you think in Scotland we're slightly more open up here to kind of stepping out of our lane or leaving our wheelhouse and making things like vermouth and things that aren't really traditionally made here? Do you think that side of the industry will grow to you? Do you think we'll expand further into other categories?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't think we've historically been good about kind of going out of our lane. I think sometimes we've been stuck to we make beer, we make whiskey. Recently, I think the gin boom has really shown that we're willing to break the mold, but I think that's been a long work in progress, kind of getting there. And I think you've mentioned the Great Australian Vermouth. So that was some of what we looked at was, of course, looking at the fantastic Italian vermouths, the great French vermouths, and the Spanish ones as well. Looking at Cocky and Martini and all the other great Italian brands, and saying, well, they're great. We want to be different. So then we started kind of really researching the great countries that are kind of being bold, being adventurous, doing things differently, and looking at the Australian ones. Of course, that was things like Rebel Rogue, like Maddenai, really great products that have done things differently, and there's they were inspired by Europe but wanted to put their own twist on it. I think in Scotland, the whiskey industry has always kind of borrowed from Europe. We borrow their barrels quite literally for sherry cask aging and French oak for be it kind of Limousin cask and all those kind of things. There is a little bit of a heritage there, but I do think sometimes we've not pushed the boundaries as much, but I think we're really getting there. There's other great products in Scotland doing amazing things, like the guys from Sweet Dram with their whiskey and marrows, with their escubac. So I think we're starting to push the barriers, but I think we've maybe been slow in the past.
I guess as well, I mean, there's such a strong mixed drinks culture, especially in the Central Belt in Scotland, but around the country, there's quite a high standard of cocktails and mixology, for want of a better phrase. Do you think it was inevitable for someone like yourself, when obviously you've done your time working behind bars and whatnot, if you keep looking down at your rail or into the stuff you're picking up every day, and all of it's from somewhere else, and everything behind you is your malt whiskey that's from locally, do you think it's an inevitable thing that Scotland would eventually want to fill that rail with our own products, be it vermouths or Amari and gins and such things?
Yeah, I think people in Scotland are fiercely proud of what we can make and what we can do. So, and we want to, we are kind of tapping into that, and that's also been a motivation for us. Is exactly as you say, there's been a kind of, you're looking down and seeing all these things that come from overseas, and you say, well, how could we do that? How could we contribute to that? And that's kind of where it's come from. And I think as well, the cocktail culture, since I first worked in bars, the cocktail that I made every night, 100 of them or something a night, was a vodka raspberry flirtini, or a cosmopolitan. This is 2006, working in a bar in Princess Square. That was all we made. To suddenly, there's so many bars making, Aperol spritzes, making, all sorts of different cocktails, and adding a little Scottish element to them. There's so many great Scottish gins, and we're moving away from just using white spirits in cocktails in even your most mainstream bars, so using your rums, using your whiskies. And there's, of course, the guys attempting to make rum in Scotland, and some of them doing so really successfully. So I think we are looking to kind of put a Scottish angle on it, but I don't think we should be too rooted to that, because I think we've also got to look overseas for ideas and inspiration. And to me, Valentian, the strength of what it is that it's an amalgam of cultures. And that's what we really wanted it to be. We wanted the best of things is always taking the best of different elements and bringing them together, and finding a, not being too rooted to just being Scottish. Sometimes you got to kind of collaborate to make something better.
Absolutely. And just as a slight aside, where does the name come from?
So the name comes from the name of the Roman region north of Hadrian's Wall, and south of the Antonine Wall. So a lot of people think the Hadrian's Wall was the final frontier of the Roman Empire. It actually wasn't. Within only a few years, they'd gone north of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and there's another wall there called the Antonine Wall. And there's even evidence that they went up as far as Aberdeen, which is frankly the final frontier for many Scots. So, I think, that's kind of where the inspiration of the name came from. It was, how do we amalgamate both Scotland and Italy? How do we find a little link? Because my brother and I aren't Italian. Although we have a real passion for the place and an absolute love of Italy, it was about kind of finding an authentic story to tell. And close to our family home in the Scottish borders, there's actually the ruins of a Roman fort at the Tremontium. There's kind of archaeological dig site. So that was a great way of telling this story.
Interesting. It's a bit of a history nerd. I very much like that references. That's class. I suppose one of the things that I'm going to ask you now, which kind of might be interesting from your point of view. You've obviously done, as I say, you've been making drinks for well over a decade or 15 years, and having done what you've done with the vermouth and various things and being in the production process. Is there something? What annoys you most about the drinks industry? Have you got a kind of a particular bugbear or a bit of a gripe that kind of gets on your nerves regularly?
There's always something, but I'm trying to think how I be political about this. Make it not too obvious. No, I think there's sometimes people kind of say there's a lot of daft cliched phrases out there, and I think people say, oh, there's a whiskey out there for everybody. I'm not too wedded to that. I think you can't really force people to love a product. You've just got to be gentle with them and kind of be really easy with them. And I think there are still some people on the whiskey side of the industry who still don't see it as having a place in cocktails. And I'm really hoping we're kind of coming to the end of that. But I still think there are the laggards behind who haven't quite caught up yet. I don't know about you, if that's still something that you see a lot of, is people are still a bit too wedded to, if it's brown, it's with ice at push,
Yeah, absolutely. It's very prevalent, and when you kind of do the horrible thing of delving into any online forum about whiskey, you do find these kind of bizarre things. What have you done to that? You've mixed it. It's like 25 quid from Tesco, mate. Like, so what? I completely agree with you. There's some people dragging their feet around that. Putting 40 quid bottles of gin into a gin and tonic, but not wanting to mix a 20 quid bottle of whiskey.
I think that's exactly it. And I think, I think we need to find more people to introduce to the delight of a smoky cookie.
Yeah, absolutely. A smoky cookie, or even the joys of a simple highball, are kind of, I think, are much missed by those who refuse to mix.
Exactly. I think, probably 3/4 of the world, if not more, drink their whiskey in a mixed drink. be it with in parts of, I think, Asia, it's Coke, or it's green tea, or it's flavored soda waters, or in Japan it's these kind of infused waters and things like that. As you say, the highball has such a place in many cultures, and we really need to be open to that. So, and I think actually, strangely, for some reason in Scotland, we moved away from that, because I know my grandparents' generation, the big thing they drank was whiskey and soda, or whiskey and lemonade. Scotch and soda was a classic. But I think maybe from kind of the 60s onwards, it became this treat it with, kind of divine revelation that isn't always required to enjoy a good drink.
Well, yeah, that kind of rise of the single malt as well. Traditionally you shouldn't mix a single malt. Traditionally, no one was drinking single malts until 1982.
Yeah, exactly. So nobody drank them, because until about 1950, a lot of them weren't very good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were blended to make a better product, and those blends were, as you say, I mean, even going back further, cognac and soda was the big thing, and then Phylloxera happened, and all the Scotch whiskey industry companies swooped and tried to push up whiskey and soda. So it's much more traditional than drinking it out of a Glencairn glass.
Exactly, and I think there are products like Drambuie and things like that tell you that people used to kind of mix their whiskey. They added herbs, they added honey, they added other things to it to make it more palatable, more enjoyable.
Even something simple as a whiskey mac or the rusty nail. Just sweetening it up. It's our equivalent of the old fashioned almost.
Oh, absolutely. No, it totally is. I guess it really is. A whiskey mac and all these things are just kind of twists on an old fashioned. They really are.
Absolutely, yeah. And our hot toddy is just a punch.
Exactly. Why do we drink a hot toddy, but we've got an aversion to a whiskey cocktail? You're like, they're the same thing.
Man, isn't it? I mean, no one will blink at a hot toddy. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, of course. But no, or even an Irish coffee. But anyway, I could go on about it for much. But on the flip side of this, and I'm assuming you must have some fairly interesting experiences, especially in the development of Valentian and elsewise. But of all the kind of memories you have of the drinks industry or drinks related memories, what's your favorite? What was your favorite moment when you realized that you were in a particularly special situation simply because you were in the drinks industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so incredibly lucky. I grew up around the drinks industry, and my late father was with William Grant and Sons for 20 years. So I think I did my first whiskey distillery visit at 5 years old, and I even did my high school work experience in a whiskey distillery. But it wasn't until kind of much later that I developed what I call a true passion for it. I always had whiskey, always had respect for it. But I kind of came to really being into it kind of later, and it was somebody had given me a bottle of Glenlivet 15-year-old French Reserve, and I was sitting final year of university, had just finished final exams. Some friends and I went up to a house on a loch about an hour north of Glasgow, and we sat till 2 a.m. drinking champagne and whiskey and barbecuing things till 3 a.m. 2, 3 a.m. And we started drinking this Glenlivet that I decided I wasn't going to open until I'd finished my exams, and we polished it off between 4 or 5 of us in the one night. And I was like, I really like this stuff now. It was as if my palate kind of changed, even though I've been working in bars and making cocktails, I don't think I've really developed a true love of Scotch whiskey. So that was when I really started kind of quizzing my dad about it, getting really kind of excited about the products. I was always a beer drinker and had actually written my final year dissertation about beer, but that kind of was a stepping stone into the spirit side of things as much as bartending, and that's kind of where that passion went. And then I was lucky enough to work in London for some different whiskey companies, and then eventually with William Grant and Sons, and just amazing trips to the distilleries, to Glenfiddich and Balvenie, to Tullamore, and as well as over to France to see some of the champagne houses. So great exposure to both the wine and the spirits side of things. And that's been, so invaluable in making Valentian and really driving the passion to learn more, to see more, and just having the opportunity to go to some of the best bars in the world when I was working in London for grants, and seeing, people pushing the boundaries, pushing the boat out and doing things differently.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's such a common theme for these questions. I mean, the kind of travel that a lot of us are very fortunate to do, and seeing people at the front line and I guess at the forefront of innovation, especially in some of the best bars in the world, and having your front row seat to something that you're so involved in, and appreciate. It's like, just because you play football doesn't mean you're going to go watch Barcelona every week, but we actually can go and see the best of the business almost whenever we want.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I came back to Scotland. My late father had founded the Borders Distillery, and I now kind of work for them as well as developing Valentian. So I do some work with them as well, and that's been incredibly kind of both an emotional journey as well as a kind of more a kind of professional learning journey as well to see how a distillery started and finished, and that's been incredible, and also had great support from them and encouragement and from the guys down there about how to get Valentian made, and guidance about how to do a startup drinks company. And I have to say, I think that's actually, you're talking about the future of drinks in Scotland. I think one of the best things that Scotland has is the culture around startup drinks companies. I don't think people are too defensive anymore. Maybe they were at some point, but people kind of want to help the other makers, the other producers. They really want to share their thoughts and their ideas. So that's been really kind of motivating and passion building and supportive. There's always people in the industry, be it gin or whiskey or whatever, you can ask them and they don't see it as rivalry. There's a kind of rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing going on.
Actually, I do often observe, and obviously I'm not involved with brands necessarily, but the kind of fraternal nature of it's really impressive to me. I working for a wholesaler, or a retailer. I obviously do a lot of brands and big brands, but I genuinely never hear, as you said, that kind of rivalry or what are they up to, or fucking Diageo are doing this, or someone's doing this, or Grants is stepping on my toes. It all seems to be big and small, looking out for each other. And that sounds a little bit kind of twee as I say it, but generally in Scotland especially, everyone seems to be happy that everyone else is doing well.
Yeah, totally. I think about times I've been in bars and selling Valenti and showing it to bartenders, and there's been brand ambassadors from other products in there who go, "Can I try that?" And there's kind of a moment of, "Oh, that's a great compliment," and then they go, "Well done, mate. Good luck. Oh, you should try here." And they see it as a way of kind of supporting you, support them, and all that kind of stuff. There's a fraternal nature, exactly as you say, and there's a community. It's not I don't think drinks. Having worked in finance as well at one point in my career, there's no kind of dog eat dog nature in drinks. I think there maybe was at one point, but it's not something I've ever truly experienced in any great way.
Absolutely, everyone's just kind of happy, both on a personal and a kind of more company-wide nature. Everyone's just happy if people are drinking good things and out supporting all of us. But you said you kind of just told us there how you kind of got into your love of whiskey with that bottle of Splendid. And so I mean, I now have to ask you, as is the title of the show, your Desert Island Drams. So three liquids, as it were. I think I would probably guess one of them that you would take to a desert island, perpetually refilling kind of bottles if they were all you drink for the rest of your life. And what would they be?
So I've been thinking long and hard about this because I've got a good collection and it's always hard to choose, isn't it? So I'd definitely be taking Valentian because I made it. You got to take your own juice. And kind of the two whiskies I think I would take, I'd probably take Glenlivet 15-year-old French Reserve because it's got great memories. And I've always had a soft spot. Oh, I'm torn. No, I'm going to go for Glenfiddich Project 20. It's a bit of an outlier, but I reopened the bottle of it recently and I was like, it really is a cracker of a whiskey. It's really just very, very different. I love Glenfiddich. It was one of the first whiskies I tried, but it's like Glenfiddich taken to a different level.
And well, that puts Glenfiddich XX or Kiss Kiss as something rather fun, rather knowing it's known as. But you get one. Sorry, say that again.
The Holly Valance edition.
Yes, yeah. Well, We managed to do one live version of Desert Island Drams in the summer when we had that slight relaxation, and Andy Gemmell, Project 20 was one of his as well. So it gives it, it's got 2 votes now. But I do like with the, as you said, the blended at 15. Everyone who comes on, and there's some people who, in the industry for 30, 40 years and have drunk more whiskey and amazing whiskey than I can think of. And it all still comes back to memory. People pick something that they have fond memories of. It doesn't mean it's the best whiskey in the world or the best thing they ever tasted. I like it. It's a fond and kind of, there's a reminiscence about it that kind of draws people to a choice.
Totally. I think that's kind of what, it's there's a great phrase, and I think it's Mother India's restaurant in Glasgow. It says, "What is patriotism but love of the food of one's homeland," or something like that. And I think there's something about drinks. What is your favorite drink, but the one that kind of reminds you of a great memory or brings forth a great memory. There's something in that. That it's that kind of distillation of a little moment in time that can trigger you. That smell, that aroma, that taste that just brings back a time when you were having good thoughts, you were in a good place, you were with friends, or maybe even alone, just enjoying the moment, and I definitely think there's something in that,
Yeah, the more I kind of get into it, the more I just liken it to music. There are songs that take you to a certain time, but even there's whiskey from the 80s tastes different to whiskey from the 90s, just like music was different. I think that the kind of the memories and the progression of it is can be so linked to an art like music, which I think is why we so fall in love with it as part of the industry.
I think that's actually a good way of describing it, because I think some people would say there's elements of music that are a science, like the way you record it. Maybe some people say some music, there's a formula to what makes a hit, but there's got to be the art side of things to it as well, and I think that's where drinks and music have a great kind of synergy, or a great meeting point, a great Venn diagram or something, and I think was there a brand ambassador? Was it Grant Neve at Compass Box was doing whiskey and music tastings at one point? And and I think there's something in that. The music you're listening to can change your experience of what you're drinking, and or hearing that song can remind you of that drink that you really enjoyed.
Oh, hugely. And in the same way, it's very hard to describe why you think a song is very good. Sometimes it's hard to describe why you think a whiskey is very good. It just hits your ear or your palate, and it hits home for some reason.
Yeah, it was the line in The Sopranos: "A hit is a hit." You're like, yeah, that's so true. People go, "I don't know what I'm tasting in this drink, but it's just a good drink." And I remember drinking Nika from the barrel in a bar in Newcastle with an old friend. It's a great thing, and I was kind of early in my days of drinking whiskey, and I was drinking it, and I said, "Oh, what am I tasting?" And he just leaned in and he went, "Good whiskey."
Yeah. Yeah,
he's like, you can analyze it, just enjoy the good whiskey.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience with a friend of mine. I said, what am I getting in this? Happiness. Just taste my happiness, mate. Just get on with it. Which I think is a very good way to look at it.
Yeah, no, it is. And there's such that kind of, there exactly, if you spend too much time analyzing things, you're killing the fun on it. So I think we sometimes need to remember that we've just got to enjoy it in the moment. It's like, don't analyze the joke, laugh.
Yeah. Judging a whiskey based on taste, it's just like judging an album based on what key the songs are in. It's not relevant. Anyway, before we talk for another half an hour about music and whiskey related, I want to say thank you so much for your time. It was really interesting, and thank you for giving us that kind of insight into Valencia. It's a fantastic product. Anyone's at home, kind of with doing home bars at the minute, because obviously that's the only option. There's something different in your vermouth fridge, as it were, if you have a specific vermouth fridge. It's really interesting, something different and great in mixed drinks, but also finer varieties. But congratulations on a great product, Dominic, and I say thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely having you on.
Oh, cheers, man! Thank you very much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to drinking vermouth in bars again soon.
Absolutely, man. Well, here's to that. Take care, fella. Good to see you.
Cheers, man. Bye.